1. Quite a few years back now, I was working as an engineer for a medium-sized, 200-ish employees, company that made, among other things, industrial gantry crane systems. The company had no formal processes for anything. Engineering specifications were always subject to change, and every manager on a project always wanted to make their own mark on it to the detriment of functionality. I had recently designed a crane control console, which had been functionally perfect, but due to many late specification changes, some of the paneling was less well fastened down than I'd have liked. There were flappy bits that really should have been stiffer, maybe returns folded in down the edges, or could have had additional anchor points. When the customer complained at the quantity of the fit and finish of the console, my manager and I had a conversation that went something like this. "Hey, Katundu, you know that console you made for the customer? They're pretty cheesed off about those flappy panels." "You mean the panel next to the widget? The one which I changed 2 days before shipping because you decided you wanted a different shaped widget?" "Also, that side of the panel rattled when the twiddler twiddled. They hated that." "You mean the panel I put through production the day it shipped to be bogged on site, because you forgot to tell me the digimusquit had been removed?" "Well, next time, just make sure there's no possibility anything could flap or rattle." I really object to being accused of incompetence when I've done a faultless job in the face of adversity. Cue malicious compliance. Next project on my to-do list. Think along the lines of automated crane running on rails under a factory roof. Awkward place to get to for maintenance, particularly when there isn't space for a catwalk, so everything has to be done with riggers on ropes. My job was to design some of the crane control components. Crucially, the control enclosure and maintenance hatch were some of the areas I had responsibility for. This didn't need to be rated for use in explosive atmospheres, so I could have done a compliant job with a couple of screws. I used 96, just to be on the safe side. Before issuing to production, I checked in with my manager. "So I'm doing as you suggested, making sure I've got enough fasteners to stop this from rattling." The manager says, without looking at my design, "Well, just add a few more screws to be sure." "Okay." After this, I didn't think any more about it. Issued the drawings to production, product shipped off to the client on another continent, and some months later, when the containers had been delivered, we sent a crew out to install it. Crucially, my manager was involved with the customer liaison side of the project, so went with them. When the crew got back, I was called in by my manager. "You know the control system you drew a few months ago?" "Yes, the one you were really sure shouldn't rattle. Did it rattle?" "No, but..." It turned out that each time we needed to make any modification to the programming of the crane, we had to send a rigger up the ropes to it. This was expected, however. Rather than whipping out a couple of screws on the front panel, the rigger had to remove the best part of 100 screws on 4 sides of the crane. This maneuver took the best part of 45 minutes, rather than the 2 it should have taken. To make things worse, the O&M manual for the crane stated that it could only be operated when all covers, cowlings, fairings, and fixings were in place. This meant that after any small modification, the whole thing had to be reassembled another 45 minutes before the effectiveness of the modification could be assessed. This meant the whole calibration and acceptance testing process took nearly a week rather than a few hours. In case anyone thinks I was being a bit of a dick. Maybe I was, but I was generally an excellent employee. When my entire team was fired in a restructure, I was the only one they kept on. I should probably also point out that the company was a shocking employer. They broke labor laws all over the place, and on one occasion, I was sat in an office with the directors telling them I'd sue them if they didn't pay me as per my contract while they were trying to pay me off for less. They paid up. They broke health and safety laws like spaghetti in a blender and forced all employees to sign a waiver of many of their employment rights before employing us, which shockingly is legal in my country. My manager would even sometimes doctor my timesheets to cut my overtime after they'd been approved, but before payroll saw them, to improve his figures and cost me. I don't work there anymore. 2. Some background. I was working at a big public transport company. One of my duties was to check passengers at our means of transport, I will refer to them as units, and patrolling at our region. Sometimes at our own discretion and otherwise, we had to check particular sections or a subsection based upon different circumstances and information. For administration purposes, we had to log the number of passengers of every unit we checked or traveled with in our daily report. At some point, there was a change in how a certain subsection was operated, which caused more trouble and aggression to co-workers and other people. This situation had the attention of our headquarters, and even the national politics, so we were supposed to patrol and check this subsection at a daily basis. While this wasn't always fun to do, we did what we had to do, checking some units during our patrol and logged some numbers if we encountered any passengers, and if not, we only logged the specific unit we checked without a number of checked passengers. No big deal, until they changed something in our logging system, so we had to log a number. 0 was no longer an option. I immediately noticed this and went to my manager. The following conversation went something like this. "Hey, manager, there is a change in our logging system, and now I have to log a number of checked passengers. Even if I didn't see anyone or didn't check that unit, what should I do?"
"Hey, OP, yeah. I heard something about this. No big deal. Just log a number as you see fit. It doesn't matter."
So basically you want me to make up a number and lie in my daily report, or you expect that I count every single person?
I didn't say you have to lie, but you have to log something. And I don't expect you to count every single person if you do check a unit.
So you want me to make something up, right?
Yeah, just use your own best judgment.
Okay, but if I have to make something up, I will do it in such a way it's very clear and obvious, agreed?
Okay.
This is where my malicious compliance started. So the next time I had to patrol and check specific units, I made it clear the number of checked passengers was not realistic. For every single unit I traveled with, I logged 9,999, or 99,999 checked passengers. Clearly a made-up number. I made it my goal to duck up the numbers. As it is a very big company, numbers are a bit too important for them sometimes, and I hated that. I continued with this style of logging for months and even encouraged one or two co-workers to do the same, especially when patrolling at the before-mentioned high-risk subsection. Months go by without any change or questions, and maybe half a year later my manager called me in.
"Hey, OP, headquarters called me because they got questioned by the Department of Transportation after someone in the House of Representatives,
or whatever it's called in my country,
was asking how it was possible the number of checked passengers at the mentioned subsection had increased with millions."
To be honest, based on the maximum capacity, that wasn't even possible.
"Do you have any idea why I called you in?"
Yes, I know exactly why this is possible, and I'm grinning like a lunatic here. As I told you something like half a year ago, after our locking system changed, I was going to make sure every time I checked a unit and had to make up a number, I was going to make it very obvious that it was not a realistic number, so it should have been obvious it was a lie. If I remember correctly, I logged 9,999 or 99,999 at every single unit I was on during my patrol. But I guess you want me to change this?
Yes, please stop what you're doing and make it more realistic. I had orders to write you up and give you a formal reprimand. But now you mention it, I do remember we talked about it, and you told me what you were going to do, so in good faith, I cannot give you a write-up or something worse. But please don't do this again. There were too many higher-up members of the department upset about this.
Okay, boss, I got it, no problem. I will keep it more realistic from now on.
Thanks, and please don't ever put me in this position again. You're probably the first employee who caused this much trouble with the House of Representatives, the Department of Transportation, and headquarters just by himself.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes, really.
At this point, the numbers were so messed up they were no longer useful for anything serious. Upside was, there was a lot more attention for the issues we encountered at that subsection. Even now, a few years later, I can have a good chuckle about it. 3. A few years back, I wanted a change of scenery in terms of my job. I was working at a housing agency, but somehow just lost interest by the end. I'd always had a passion for wine on a personal level, and I felt like taking the jump into the business side of it. I got a scheduled interview at a gourmet shop with a great wine selection, and where I had shopped previously. I was greeted by the newly hired manager who, for lack of better words, looked like a military sergeant. Buzzcut and a dead serious look in his eyes. I'll refer to him as Boss. He seemed truly friendly and was witty enough through the interview. He did, however, mention that I would be taking over for an employee he had personally fired, who had worked there 7 years. I found that odd, but ended taking the job because of my passion. My first shift, I was assigned to the guy whose job I had taken. It was odd as hell. He was, however, rather cool about it. I will refer to him as Ben. Ben showed me the ropes and taught me a few good things. To this day, I swing by his new employment and buy some wine on his recommendation. On his last day, he told me be wary of Boss and look out for myself. It caught me a bit off guard, as I hadn't really caught any red flags, besides Ben's firing, that is. As time went on, it became quite clear what he meant. Ben wasn't the only one he had fired. In fact, during the 6 months Boss had been there, he had fired 15 people, varying from cashiers to kitchen staff. I found out more than 5 people in addition to that had quit in that time. Boss's routine became clear too. He would lure you in, be charming and charismatic, even give you a small gift after your first few weeks. As soon as you're settled in, his demeanor changes. It went from heaven to hell during my first year. He would micromanage to the point where he would skip his own meetings just to circle the store and complain about people's work. He was convinced everyone would omit from doing their job if he didn't keep watch. Just over my first year in, I'm pretty drained. I love the job itself, and co-workers are nice, but the boss is a living, walking psychopath. As time went on, his wording and his demeanor became more and more sinister. He would at times stalk me whenever I went from the store into our storage to ask, "What are you doing in here?" My answer always remained the same, doing my job, what else? Fast forward a few months, and I am at rock bottom. I hate getting up in the morning, I hate going to work, and I hate my boss. One day I encounter the same issue I've done every day for months. I go into storage to place an order on the computer. He marches in and asks me what I'm doing. I reply with a question. "What do you think I'm doing?" He goes livid. He yells and shouts as I tell him he shouldn't talk to me that way, as calmly as I could, but honestly, I was shook by him. His response, "If you don't fucking like it, find another job, you fuck." And so, that's exactly what I set out to do. In the meantime, I did call HR and announced that I was struck with stress due to workplace environment issues. I spent a week at home as I tried to regain my thoughts, my energy, and in general some peace and quiet. I also lined up 2 job interviews by the end of the week. HR calls, say they want to resolve everything. They more or less admit, off the record, that Boss is a special person to be around. They admit that I'm not the first, nor even the 5th case. They give me a possibility of staying on for another month, which suits me perfectly if I land a job elsewhere. Here comes the kicker. The company had a bakery shop elsewhere that they needed to close, but still had a rental contract on. They wanted someone to run a pop-up wine shop there. I would get away from Boss, and I was happy with that. The boss, however, had shipped out a fuck-ton of shitty wine without even asking my opinion on the stock, or taking the size of the store into consideration. It was a clutter, to say the least. On the 2nd week there, I got a call about one of the interviews I had been to. I landed the job. I was pretty stoked and looking forward to getting away from here. In the final week, still plenty of shitty wine stacked up in the store. I'm thinking about how the fuck all this is gonna get moved out of here. Boss calls me up Tuesday and says that he'll send some quarter pallets and stretch wrap, and everything has to be ready to go by Friday. He doesn't send this before late Wednesday, and to make matters worse, he sends me 1 roll of stretch wrap and by my count 2 few pallets. I call him back, tell him I need more rolls of wrap and some pallets, in which he proceeds to tell me to make do. I did call someone else at the store and try to make them send another stretch wrap. I never did get one, so I guess Boss intercepted that plea as well. Time for malicious compliance. I spent all Thursday accommodating customers while zipping around packing pallet after pallet. One stacked quite alarmingly higher than the other, while one is filmed with even less layer than the one before. Even a blind person could see just how poor of a job all of this was. 43 quarter pallets to be exact, one even shittier stacked and filmed than the next. Oh, I made do. A truck pulls up on Black Friday and I keep hauling pallet after pallet out. The two guys assigned do not look pleased whatsoever. They can see just how hazardous this shitload is going to be to drive with. They still manage to load it up without much hassle, but not without taking their time balancing every other pallet. I'm pretty much in disbelief they even accepted to haul it at all. My shift, and thus my job, ends almost to the minute that they're done loading. I lock the place up, hand the keys to one of the guys, and head off into the sunset as I pleasantly await a call from my former boss. An hour creeps by and my phone rings. Boss is screaming and shouting at the other end about dozens upon dozens of shattered bottles and wine everywhere in the truck and on their loading bay, and
"What the fuck were you even doing?"
I told him that I made do as I ended the call. 4. Backstory. I worked retail when I was younger. Like most people, it was a mixed bag, and some of my best and worst memories involved my time working in retail chains. I worked in footwear, in a then blossoming sports good franchise, and had a real knack for it. It was rewarding helping people find shoes in their sizes, and it's heartwarming at times, especially when people with disabilities showed up and really needed hands-on experience with things, and that was a core value the company had at the time. My hiring supervisor, whose name isn't important, was amazing, and the staff was really cool. We all liked and respected him a lot. But alas, like many good things, it came to a sudden and forceful end, and upper management decided change was in order, and shifted the supervisors, opening a spot in my department. That's when the new supervisor, henceforth known as Brandy, came in. Brandy was a transfer from another store 30 minutes away. The entire supervisor team knew and were not fond of her, but she filled a void, and the district manager and store manager were big fans of her for reasons unknown. We were warned that she was a woman of many faces, and would tell you or promise you things you'd never get. I learned this about her fairly quickly, and before she even knew the staff, our strong suits, our schedules, or our names, she had a set list of things she wanted done and could not be deviated from. There was also word going around she liked to make staffing changes and hire her own people when she came in. Morale died fairly quickly within the first week she was there. In short, she was a nightmare for almost the entire store. Now to the actual story. Brandy's first day was on a particularly busy summer day, and before I could even walk back to my section, I could hear her voice calling over the intercom constantly. Along the way, I was greeted by the morning staff, who gave me a quick rundown of her and what she was like. They told me to have fun. Oh boy, I thought to myself. I found her in the back near the cleats and introduced myself.
"You have your tasks assigned to you already, and I want all of the displays finished in your areas before you leave today."
I thought this was strange because I had set the displays for those exact sections the night prior, all according to the franchise standards, firmly stuffed to look like a foot was in them. No visible laces shown, and even the laces changed to go inside the shoe, so they didn't obstruct the view of the top of the shoe. They were signed off as completed by the lead on duty and even complimented. I was proud of my work. I went back to the sections I did the night before and looked them over for a few seconds, super confused. I shrugged it off and set to checking or at least restuffing a few to see if I had missed something. Nope, nothing. But I continued on as I had been instructed and did my job, and things seemed like they were going pretty smooth. Later on that afternoon, Brandy came back up to me and asked me when I was going to finish my displays, and I told her that I had. She looked at me and then back at my displays and made a look of disgust and said,
"You're going to leave them like that?"
"Like what?" I said back, confused. Nothing I did was ever really a problem in the past, and I really didn't want to piss her off because I loved my job, and it was my first day with her. She scoffed and said,
"Like this?"
and then grabbed a broken metal peg off a stock end cap and proceeded to jam as much paper as humanly possible into the shoe until it couldn't hold any more. No lie, the shoe felt like someone had filled it with concrete, and the fabric even protruded on some shoes because of the pressure. It was not pretty or guideline. After watching how she did it, I just stood there dumbstruck because, again, This went against almost all of my training up to that point. Then she started in on me, no matter how hard I tried to give her what she wanted but still meet the guideline I'd been trained for. She didn't like it, and would get me to do them again. This went on for a little bit. And then she fucked up. After an agonizing amount of time, she grabbed the shoe from me and said,
"No, do it perfect. If you can't do it perfect, then don't even try. Just leave it for someone else to do."
Let me remind you that she had a full list of other things she wanted done, but she rang a bell I wasn't going to ignore. So instead of giving me another task, she gave me a loophole. I capitalized fully. Cue malicious compliance. After an emotional wrecking like the one she had given me, I excitedly said, "Okay," and walked away to help customers. I left her there with the display still in her hand. She also said this with an earshot of several other employees that were already sour with her. She didn't want me to try if I couldn't be perfect? Fine. That's exactly what I did. I did nothing on that list for 4 months. I don't even remember anything it says on it. You might be wondering to yourself, how did you not get fired? Well, she tried several times. Anytime she would try to write me up, I would quote her exact words to her. The store supervisor, the leads, the district manager, and even someone in HR when they came to visit. Eventually she was told to stop because her attempts could be viewed as retaliation, and that was a huge corporate no-no. I still provided excellent customer service and got rave reviews and compliments when customers went to check out, and the store manager and I got along really well, so they were hesitant to push too hard. A few months later, I changed departments, and then met my now-wife on a store setup trip and moved across the state. When she found out I was quitting, she pretended to be upset, but everyone knew she wanted me gone. She was gone within a year of me moving. No clue why. Totally worth it. Thanks for the funny memories, Brandy. 5. I've been waiting about 2 months for this fallout in all its glory. I knew my boss would try to make me the fall guy, but I think I employed CYA well in this distance. A little backstory. I work as an office engineer at a mid-sized prefabricated concrete structures plant. About 3 months ago, our plant manager left spontaneously for a much higher-paying gig down south. Due to this, his responsibilities were distributed to whoever had capacity. I was put in charge of purchasing with the caveat that any purchase order, PO, over $5,000 had to be reviewed by that project's project manager. This was due to a mistake due in part to my inexperience and in part my overconfidence I made on an order which only cost us a couple grand but delayed a project. Also, due to lower labor costs and the size of our own steel shop, we have most of our large steel structures fabricated just across the border in Canada. Okay, on to the story. Our general manager is acting PM on a project, which includes a large steel frame surrounded by concrete modules. I was told to get this frame quoted by our Canadian metal fabricator. I get the quote back and throw together the PO. When I look back through the project specifications before sending the PO for review, I see our project has a Buy American clause. Not Buy America, as we had assumed. Almost all our projects are Buy America, and we are very familiar with it. This little N makes all the difference. Under Buy America, a Canadian fabricator can use American steel and meet every requirement. However, under Buy American, all steel must be domestic, and all fabrication must be done in the US. My GM was out of town on what was essentially a vacation to a project site we have in Hawaii, and was having none of my calls and emails marked as urgent. I informed him, a couple emails and multiple voicemails, that we had to go to a different fabricator, or the product would be rejected. I got an angry email back telling me to place the order immediately. I tried one more call in desperation, straight to voicemail, and then sent him over the completed PO with the Buy American spec attached, telling him this is well over my 5K limit and I needed him to approve it before I sent it out. He approved it in less than 10 minutes. I sent it and waited for the fallout. Well, it finally happened. Our product was delivered yesterday, and today the project owner sent over an inspector to make sure everything was done per project drawings. He noticed the manufacturer right away, and told us he would have to reject the product, purely because it does not meet Buy American. In less than 20 minutes, I was getting an earful from my GM, asking why this wasn't caught before we wasted over 60 grand on something that would clearly be rejected. I let him finish his rant, insulting my intelligence, threatening firing me, breaking protocol, the works. I asked him to pull up my emails from the order date, and showed him that he was informed of the issue and my concerns were ignored. He didn't take this well and told me to get the hell out of his office. Oops. Now there is nothing left but to wait. Our project will be delayed at least a month, and the owner of our company is getting involved. I have the emails saved on a jump drive at home, and the phone logs, while not recording the conversations, show that I left multiple voicemails on the same date. Cannot be touched by the GM. Still a bit nervous, but I think I covered myself pretty well. Update. So I actually ended up leaving this company, mainly due to poor management. I never really got in trouble for this, but my GM was always a dick to me afterwards. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 78. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you liked the video, then please do give it a like in the fashion that is most pleasing to you. Even if it's one of those weird upside-down like buttons. They're not preferred, but I don't really mind. Also, feel free to leave a comment if you're into that sort of thing. And if you'd like to see more videos like this and others, I mostly do the funnier videos these days. Still some scary stuff. And yes, Glitch Monthly will be back next month. Probably. I mean, I do have a few months of stories as resources to catch up on, so that should hopefully be okay. I just need to get back to a proper recording schedule instead of making the video on the day. I like to do a couple in advance, so we're gradually getting there. Right, okay, I think I'm going to head off for now. Today's voting day, so I need to make time to do that. Only got 4 hours sleep, so there'll have to be a nap. And then I'll need to make something for dinner. Can't keep living on sandwiches. Convenient though that is. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.